What is the opposite of freedom? It's not imprisonment, it's conformity. The opposite of you, particularly as an entrepreneur, being free, is to adopt and abide by the rules made up by someone else who actually in the beginning really didn't know. In this episode, we explore what are the true prices that you pay for conforming and abandoning your values. Let's grow. It's a word that has always, for me, been perhaps maybe my favorite word, at least as far as the feelings that I experience and what it generates when I hear the word freedom. To have options, to have access, to not be bound by or limited in resources, in that could be financial, it could be time. And here's the thing, I've not fully reached that. Of course, there are limits that I have in resources, and there are limits that exist in the area of relationship, be they personal and professional. But the idea of also being constrained, the idea of being caged, is one that for me, for whatever reason, has generally produced within me feelings of inadequacy, not enough. Like, why don't I have the option? Why don't I have this freedom? And so as I started to explore it and things started to truly improve, I looked at what are the reasons why, or how have I lost my freedom over time. And I recognize that I lose and have lost my freedom through conforming and or appealing to someone else's highest value or value system. John DeMartini produces great, amazing content on the hierarchy of values, and he speaks to how all essential, resentments and negative feelings, negative emotions they are generated because we're living according to someone else's value systems, and what someone else says ought be important is the thing that now I adopt as my own. And inevitably that leads to resentment. It inevitably is disaster. It's a coming train wreck. And I recognize this to be true about me, it always ends in disastrous ways when I eventually am full of and done with living according to someone else's highest values. And so in case you've not seen that content or seen this material, go to drdmartini.com. But really and truly, what for example, if a person, if their highest value system is, business, or their highest value system is studying business and that's where they get their thrill, that's where they get their juice, their inspiration, their excitement, their love is in the pursuits aligning with entrepreneurship, and they're in relationship with someone whose, their highest value is, family and family dynamic and, community and relationship and so forth, then those two, if they're not mindful of the other's value systems, they can collide. And they collide because the person who is really focused on family and family orientation and community and relationship and camaraderie, right, that clashes with what's required in, say, business and entrepreneurship, and really looking to build and make contributions in the world of business and establishing a legacy that will contribute to family. Those two, they can exist, but they usually don't, because there is no understanding of how to communicate in someone else's value system. And so instead, what happens is the person who's really focused on family and family dynamic and relationship and camaraderie and relationship makes the person who's really focused on business wrong for their eyes always being on business and wanting the conversation to be about business. And the person in business becomes annoyed and frustrated, agitated with the person who's focused on family, because it's like, how can you not see this? We're not there yet. Who wants to, just sit around, laugh, giggle, and cuddle when, there's debts to be paid or there's opportunity to be pursued? And if we can eliminate the right and wrong from either of those, then now you have the makings for what can be an extraordinary existence in relationship, neither individual giving up what it is that they want. But oftentimes what happens is one or the other, in order to keep the relationship, they look to acquiesce, they look to conform to, well, okay, she's saying this is important, so maybe she's right, I need to have this focus. Or he's saying this is important, so maybe I need to, or she and she, or he and he, it doesn't matter, okay? Usually what happens is one conforms, and the one who does the conforming, unbeknownst to them, is building up resentments. They're building up energies that will lead to a demise. And it cannot be other than that, because we are working against ourselves. We work against the law when we're in the space of conforming. It also limits creativity. It limits innovation. You're stuck and you don't know why. Some of the best moments of my life in the last year plus, have been in the moments alone, just after some communication about how I ought to be, need to be, should be, and me just taking a deep breath in knowing that this is the price that's paid for living according to what I value most. And acknowledging and appreciating and in fact loving myself for not doing what most do. So then, okay, well, why is it that we feel this need to conform? Well, we have that need, we feel the need to conform because our first program and conditioning was really around acceptance. When you think about it, if someone doesn't accept you on day one, your birth, if someone doesn't accept you, if you're not there to be received, you don't make it to day two. Whether that be the medical staff, mom, dad, whoever it be, on the day that you showed up on the planet, if someone is not there to take you in, then you don't make it. As human beings, we're not equipped, we're not designed to even exist on our own. And so we figure out then that it's very important to be accepted. It's important to be received. And so we don't do things that go too far out of what will enable us to be accepted. And so from very early on, we're taught the things necessary for acceptance in order to make it for conformity. When I look back at it now, there are a lot of things that I had energy towards my mom about because I thought she was, and felt that she was so strict and she was so rigid, and, her rules were just unwavering. And I was afraid, man. I was afraid to break any of them, right? Like, I was more afraid of what my mom would do than any bully on the playground, for sure. I was afraid. And now when I look back at that, and I'm like, I have so much, fear about risking new things and doing different things and exploring different environments. And I'm like, man, where does a lot of that fear come from? And a lot of it came from that environment. But when I look at it now under closer scrutiny, I'm like, oh, well, what if, based on her experiences, based on what she had known and come to understand and lived through, all of her ways of being, her discipline, her structure, all of that was about keeping me alive in the best way that she knew how. It was about keeping me alive, literally keeping me alive, keeping me off the street, out of trouble, right? No run-ins with, law enforcement, being at home at a certain hour, after a certain hour, only, it just gets more and more dangerous the longer you're out. And so when I reshaped or reframed how she was, it became, okay, it was about keeping me alive. I can appreciate that and respect that. Now I am responsible though. Now I am responsible for what I take on from the standpoint of how much of what I choose into is based on fear and how much of what I choose into is based on my desire to experience it. Does that make sense? Like fearlessness, dangerous, irresponsible. Like the feeling of fear, your amygdala fires a response to a situation or potential, outcome in an effort to keep you alive, in an effort to keep you safe. So you meet a person, and I never have, but if you meet a person who is truly fearless, by every definition of the word, truly fearless, that's a dangerous human being. It's a dangerous human being in my view, because the reality is that fear keeps you alive. Fear keeps you safe. And there's some fear, though, that is not warranted. And for those fears that are not warranted, then we must be willing to, if your desire is growth and expansion, like you don't have to do it. None of this do you have to do, right? But if your desire is growth and expansion, you must be willing to explore the fears that keep you from experiencing what you truly want. And as I've identified those fears that keep me from identifying or keep me from experiencing what I really want, I find myself taking more risk. I find myself being more honest. I find myself taking greater chances because what I want is more important than the fear, and it's stronger. What I want is stronger than the fear that I must break through in order to have it. So the opposite of freedom is conformity, making then the opposite of conformity freedom. And it requires courage. It requires courage to go alone. It requires courage to remain alone long enough for others to catch the vision of what you're about or what you want to contribute or what you want to do and what your vision is, and then get in line with and follow that. It takes a degree of courage that will not sustain itself unless you have a self-image that is conducive for the growth that you want to experience, because in the beginning, before the evidence is in the beginning, before there are results, you've got to have the experience. You've got to have the knowing that when rubber meets the road, I'm willing to place a bet on myself and I will win. That's contributed to all great entrepreneurs. That's what contributes to anyone who's willing to take the leap, to take the chance, to jump without some assurance that there's a net or there's a parachute, knowing that you can't fly. There is something that must be individually experienced that no book can give, that no podcast or audio can deliver, that no speech or talk will suffice. There is something that every individual must experience for themselves. The feeling of knowing that you went for it before you knew that it would turn out. You went for it before things were perfect. You went for it before you had all of the resources. You went for it before you knew what to do. You went for it while there was criticism and judgment and doubt. You went for it anyway. And when you did, you learned some things about yourself such that you landed on your feet. And you didn't just land on your feet. You're doing well. and those who were unwilling, those who've talked about doing what you've done. Now, your life can be inspiring to them. If he did, I can. If she did, I can. If they did, I can. Or it can be the source of new criticism and new judgments. And you hear the rumblings of conversations from people who want to remind you of what they knew of you. But they can only talk about what they knew of you because they don't know you now. One is past, the other is present. And in order to exist in the present with you would require them to do transformational work on themselves that, at least as yet, they're not willing to do. And so therefore, they can remind you of who you were, of what you did, of behaviors that were, even I've been reminded of behaviors that I am not proud of. I've been reminded over the last year of things that I've done that I am not proud of. I've been reminded of who I was, but I notice that I don't argue it. I don't. Often I apologize. And still other times I connect with what must have been happening for me that I was behaving or showing up in that way. But it's not an energy that I carry, because I know that they can only speak of who I was because they don't know me now. And the same goes for you. If you're willing to stay the course and not conform, if you're willing to experience the freedom that comes from following your own purpose, mission, and vision, if you're willing to do that, and you're willing to do it for long enough, you will see that you have it within you to not only land on your feet, but to begin again and soar. And as a result of that, you can have your life be an inspiration to those who seek a model of what it's like to leave the masses and experience a life worthy of you. I hope that helps. If it does, don't keep it a secret. Let someone know that this podcast exists. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next episode. If you haven't already, I ask that you subscribe to the channel, but only if you got value from this and you believe that podcasts like this or information like this should be, recognized or seen, then subscribe. If not, then don't. Okay. In addition to that, I encourage you to join my email list, courtlandwarren.com/opt-in, OPTIN, courtlandwarren.com/opt-in, and you'll receive communication from me directly, which makes it so that I'm not dependent on platforms. I can reach out to you directly in your email or your inbox when I have something that I believe will be of value to you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you, and we will see you next time.